and welcome to the PhD Life Coach podcast. And today we are back to our Be Your Own Best Boss little series. So those of you who listen regularly will know that over the last couple of months, I've been doing episodes where I think about what qualities we need in order to be better bosses for ourselves. This is all based on the notion that how we speak to ourselves and how we treat ourselves is really important, not just for what we get done, but also how we experience doing our PhDs and working in academia. And often we're not doing this well, right? Often we're being judgmental bosses, we're being confusing bosses, we're being 1 minute very kind of indulgent bosses and the next minute very disciplinarian. And it doesn't have to be like that. We can learn. It is a skill and a practice to develop the ability to lead ourselves in a way that's more effective and that feels better. Now, I have a whole online course about this, the Be Your Own Best Boss course, which will take you through the whole process of identifying what sort of boss you're being to yourself at the moment, and then developing the habits that you want in terms of self-talk, planning, organization, reviewing, and generally achieving success. Now, I identified 10 qualities that I think all good bosses should have, whether it's your actual boss or, in this case, the boss you're being to yourself. And I've been talking about those in these series of episodes. So you may have heard me talk already about being more compassionate and more curious. There's another episode about being more encouraging and accepting. And then a third about being more intentional and resourceful. If you haven't listened to those yet, don't worry, you don't have to listen to them all in order, but I would recommend that you go back and find them. I'll link to them in the show notes on my website, phdlifecoach.com. Today, we're going to be thinking about two that I think link together really well, and that is being more strategic and being more ambitious. And if you hear those and go, oh no, that's not me, that's not my vibe at all, please stay with me. Trust me. I am going to define strategic and ambitious in ways that I think will feel good to all of you. And I hope by the end of this episode, you'll not only see why I think this is important, but also understand how you can implement this in your own life. I'm going to follow the same structure as before, where I talk about what I mean by strategic and ambitious, what circumstances I think it's useful to have these qualities, what thoughts you need to have in order to be strategic and ambitious, what feelings those thoughts will generate, what actions they'll allow you to take, and what results they'll allow you to achieve. And the reason I use that structure, for those of you who aren't familiar, is that's the self-coaching model. This notion that our thoughts create our feelings create our actions, and our actions create our results. If you want to hear more about that, again, I will link to an episode where I talk you through how you can use that model to coach yourself and help yourself achieve any goals that you want to achieve. But I structure these episodes around that so that we've got a really concrete plan about how we can implement this stuff into our lives. So let's start by thinking about being more strategic. Now, one of the things we all know about academia is there's just too many things to do. There are so many options. You could do this study or that study. You could go to this conference or that conference. You could volunteer for this, volunteer for that. So many things. And often it feels as though you have to do all of those things in order to succeed. And we all know that what happens when you try and do all of them is that we end up exhausting ourselves and not doing any of the things as well as we could do. Now, in the last one of these, I talked about being intentional, and that was about choosing our behaviors as well. But the difference with being strategic is we're choosing our behaviors not just on the basis of what feels good and what aligns with what we want, but we're also choosing our goals and behaviors in terms of what aligns with the organization or powers or people that can influence our careers. So, for example, when you're strategic, you're choosing which activities you take partly on the basis of which ones you want to do, but also on the basis of which ones are likely to be recognized by your examiners, which ones are likely to be recognized by reviewers, by promotions panels. It's understanding that whether you're a PhD student, academic, or a senior professor, you are part of an institution, of a discipline, of a sector that has particular priorities. And when we can understand those priorities, we can choose which things to spend more time on. Sometimes being strategic can sound a little bit self-serving. It can sound a little bit like we're sucking up. We'll do whatever the big man wants us to do. And it doesn't have to be like that. It can be like that. Some people do that form of strategy. I like to think of it as a Venn diagram where you've got a circle of all the things that you care about and that you want to spend time doing. And you have a circle of all the things that the organization wants you to do, whether that's for your qualification or for your job. And what we're interested in is finding the places that overlap, finding the places where the things that feel good and important to you overlap with what feels good and important to your organization, so that we can strategically put our efforts in those places most, so that not only do we enjoy what we're doing, we value what we're doing, but that we get the recognition that we deserve. Does it mean that you can't do some of the things that are just for you, things that you think are important, but that your organization, your supervisor, whoever it is, doesn't seem to value? No, of course not. You can do whatever you want, but choose it mindfully. Choose it knowing that you're doing those things because you think they're morally important, or you think they're important to your discipline, and you recognize that they're not things that shift the needle in terms of your actual career progression. That's fine. You get to pick that. We're people. We're not just career building machines. You get to do whatever you want here, but do it knowingly. Don't sit over there doing all the things for all people and then wondering why you don't get any recognition for it. So if you can be a more strategic boss for yourself or develop your understanding of strategy, then we start to recognize and understand some of the complicated structures there are in academia, and then decide how and when our goals align with those and what we need to therefore do in order to achieve our professional goals. So in what situations, what circumstances is it useful to be more strategic? Well, I'm thinking about things like if you're asked to take on a new role, whether you're asked to be a postgrad rep or whether you're asked to be a head of department or whatever it might be. That sort of thing where you're choosing whether or not to take on a role. I think it's important to be strategic when you're choosing which goals you're going to focus on. We get to be strategic when we're going to new events. Now, again, this doesn't mean going and being that networking weirdo that only wants to talk to important people, not everybody else. But being strategic when you're choosing how many of the sessions you go to, which sessions you go to, whether there are specific people that you want to try and speak to for specific reasons, we can be strategic around all of that. And if you want more help with networking, again, I'll link in the show notes, but I did a really good interview with Dr. Jen Polk about networking, so do check that one out. The fourth circumstance I came up with when you're invited to get involved in a project, whatever level of academia you're in, you might get asked to collaborate on something, to contribute towards something, and you get to decide. Often we don't see it as a decision, right? It's just like, oh my God, thank you so much for asking me. But if people invite you to do those things, it is a decision, and you can be strategic when you decide whether you're going to do them or not. So it's those sorts of circumstances. That's not an exclusive list, but it's that kind of thing. And what thoughts would I try and generate if I was trying to be a strategic boss to myself? It's things like, I can decide where and if this fits with my other commitments. So it's that acknowledgement that there's choices to be made here and you get to choose. It's reassuring yourself things like, I don't have to do it all. I need to choose what things I do, but I don't have to do it all. It's thoughts like, at the moment, I'm focusing on X, so that other thing can wait. And again, I feel like I'm sending you off to loads of other episodes here, but I think there's so much good stuff on here for you. I also had an episode about thinking of your career in phases, and this can really help with this idea that I'm focusing on this thing now and I'm doing that thing later. That's a thing for after my PhD. That's a thing for after the teaching term's done or whatever. The final thought that I think is really useful is accepting that sometimes we need other people to help us navigate this stuff. So it's thinking things like, there are people that will help me understand what I need to do and how to take these next steps. Universities can feel like really complex, weird, arcane places, and understanding that there will be people, they may not be the people you're directly around day to day, but there will be people who can help you navigate that is part of being a strategic boss. You don't have to know this all yourself. You just have to know that these things exist and that there are people who can help you figure this out. Now, if you think thoughts like that regularly, I think you'd end up feeling emotions like calm and committed and focused and maybe even relieved because you're not chasing your tail. You can choose what you're doing. And if you're feeling all those emotions, I think you take actions like reaching out for advice, getting clearer on your goals so you can check you're aligning with them, getting clearer on the goals of your organization or your degree so that you can choose how much you align with them. Saying no to things that don't align with your priorities or that don't serve your current goals. And doing some things well instead of trying to cram everything in. And I think the results of those actions would be things like a streamlined work plan, a calmer work life, clearer progress towards goals that you actually know why you're pursuing them, and getting advice that will actually help you implement all of this. So I want you to think, to what extent do you think you're a strategic boss already? Is this stuff that kind of comes naturally to you, or always seems a bit of a mystery? If it seems like a bit of a mystery, don't worry. That's really common, especially if you have any demographic characteristics that means that higher education doesn't reflect you as much as it could. It's not unusual to feel like you don't know any of this stuff. That doesn't stop you being strategic. I want you to identify ways that you're already being quite strategic. I know you all will be to some extent. And to think about things that you could do that would make it a little bit easier to be a little bit more strategic in future. Quick interjection. If you're finding today's session useful, but you're driving or walking the dog or doing the dishes, I want you to do one thing for me after you've finished. Go to my website, phdlifecoach.com, and sign up for my newsletter. We all know that we listen to podcasts and we think, oh, this is really, really useful, I should do that. And then we don't end up doing it. My newsletter is designed specifically to help you make sure you actually use the stuff that you hear here. So every week you'll get a quick summary of the podcast, you'll get some reflective questions, and you'll get one action that you can take immediately to start implementing the things we've talked about. My newsletter community also have access to 1 session a month of online group coaching, which is completely free, but you have to be on the email list to get access. They're also the first to hear when there's spaces on my one-to-one coaching or when there are other programs and workshops that you can get involved with. So after you've listened, or even right now, make sure you go and sign up. Now, the second part of this is going to be thinking about being more ambitious. And again, this is another word that people can make sound quite negative sometimes. I remember once I got criticized for being ambitious. I was talking to somebody quite senior about some ideas that I had, and there were quite a lot of things that I was keen to do. And he was like, "You're quite ambitious, aren't you?" And I was a bit like, I don't know how to reply to that because, I mean, kinda, but also you make it sound like that's a bad thing, and I don't quite understand why. It was almost you don't have to worry about all of that, dear, sort of vibe. And it was definitely not how it was intended. The person who said it was very, very well intentioned. But it was still this slight negative. And I think particular sectors of society, women, people of colour, will experience being called ambitious differently than other people. Now, again, in this, I'm not talking about being ambitious in any negative sense. I'm not talking about being ambitious in the sense of squashing other people to get to the top or any of those things. I'm talking about being keen to achieve the things that you want to achieve, to reach your definition of success. That you are someone who strives towards things that are important. And importantly, somebody who's willing to face proximal challenges. So stuff that's happening now, so feeling uncomfortable, working hard, feeling embarrassed potentially, all of these things, you're willing to risk those proximal challenges in order to achieve your broader goals, those broader ambitions. That's what being ambitious means in this context. Circumstances where I think it would be good to be ambitious are when you're trying to decide whether to do something that feels difficult. Often we allow the fact that it feels difficult to say, maybe I shouldn't, maybe I'm not quite ready yet, maybe later. When actually, if we can be ambitious and we can be like, you know what, I'm willing to do something that's difficult in order to achieve these important goals, then that's us being ambitious. I want you to be more ambitious when you're worrying about whether you're good enough to do something or not. We so often compare our insides with everybody else's outsides, and we say, surely there's somebody better for this role. Why? Why not you? In fact, that's a great thought to have. Why not me? Why shouldn't I do this role? I want you to be ambitious when you're thinking about middle to long-term goals. Often we're over-ambitious when it comes to what we can get done in the next hour or the next day, but we're really unambitious in terms of what we can get done in the next 3 months or the next year. Be ambitious when you're setting your goals, you're setting the things that you think you can contribute to the world, when you're deciding on your definition of success. There's uncomfortableness in any goal. If we pick silly little goals, there'll be uncomfortableness around, oh, maybe it's not good enough. Maybe maybe I didn't try hard enough. Maybe I should have done more. There's uncomfortableness in going for ambitious goals. So if there's uncomfortableness either way, why not be ambitious? Why not set our sights high and try and make that happen? Now, there's a whole bunch of thoughts that you can have if you're being a more ambitious boss to yourself. And this is things like, I've done difficult things before. So this is about reminding ourselves of our capabilities. I have the capacity to learn to be good at this. We don't have to already think we can do it. So often people won't take on a role because they're not sure if they can do it. And I'm like, dude, if you can already do the whole role, don't take on the role. How boring. Do a role for the next 3 years that you're already sure you can do? Dull. Take on a role that you think you can learn to be good at by about the middle of your term. So at the beginning, you'll be a bit like, oh, this is hard. In the middle, you'll be like, you know what? I think I can do this. And by the end of the 3 years, you'll be a bit like, yeah, I'm kind of done with this now. This is straightforward for me now. That's perfect. So I have the capacity to learn to be good at this. Remind yourself that you're willing to be uncomfortable so that you can achieve your goal. And remind yourself there's going to be uncomfortableness regardless of what you decide. So you may as well choose the ambitious goal. Reassure yourself you have something important to offer. I saw a lovely interview with Kamala Harris where she was talking to a young girl about public speaking. And she was saying, you might be scared, you might be nervous when you're public speaking, but the audience needs to hear your ideas. So we have to be willing to be uncomfortable, willing to have that period of time where we're doing something that makes us nervous so that people can receive our ideas. And I just loved that as an approach to nerves. It's not that you have to not be nervous, and it's not that you have to make all of that go away. We have to be willing to experience it so that people can get the benefit of the things that we have to say. We have to remind ourselves that this thing that feels difficult is the next step, to achieving the goals, the things that are important to us. And we have to remind ourselves that it is safe for us to put ourselves forward for it. And we can know it's safe by pledging that we will look after ourselves, that if we go for these ambitious goals and then we fail, we don't reach them in entirety, we will be kind to ourselves. We won't beat ourselves up for having attempted it in the first place. We won't tell ourselves we were stupid for even considering having gone for it. We'll be kind to ourselves, whether we succeed or whether we fail or anything in between, because that's what makes it safe to have ambitious goals, knowing that you will be okay, whatever happens. And the final thing is to have that glimmer of what could be. It's that whole cheesy, little motivational things you get on Instagram that are like, yes, what if you fall, but what if you fly? I want you to keep the thought, this could be amazing. Imagine if this all goes well. Imagine if we achieve this goal. How amazing that could be. And if we think thoughts like this, we might at minimum feel resolved. If we're thinking thoughts like, I'm willing to do the difficult things, then we might feel resolved and we might feel willing to do the stuff. But we might even get glimmers of excitement and hope and optimism and meaning. by trying to achieve ambitious goals that actually we've selected intentionally, we've aligned strategically, and now we're supporting ourselves to achieve, that might feel amazing, mightn't it? Don't you think? Now, if you're feeling excited, hopeful, willing, resolved, you might put yourself forward for a challenging role or opportunity that you'd perhaps been a bit worried about. You might make a suggestion for how things could be improved, step up to be the one that makes things better. You might start planning out a route that, even if that goal feels like a really long way away over there, you might start planning a route to getting to it. And you might start visualizing what it would be like to actually be someone who can achieve those goals. And I want you to notice the two different types of results that are here. One is achieving the goals. That is one amazing result, that you go off and do those things that you dreamed of. But the other result, and this result is even more important than the other result, is that you have become somebody who can do difficult things. By being ambitious and then putting in the work to try and achieve that goal, you become somebody who can do difficult things, who can take steps towards an ambitious goal. And the one I love about that result more than anything is that it doesn't matter if you achieve your goal or not. If you set an ambitious goal, you work hard towards that ambitious goal, you coach yourself through that process, then regardless of whether you get to the actual specific ambitious goal or not in the end, you have become someone who is willing to be uncomfortable, who is willing to do difficult things, who is willing and able to learn, who can take themselves through these things of believing that it's possible, even when it doesn't feel like it is, and who can get really close to achieving their goals. Becoming that person sets you up to do everything in the future. I want you to think about yourself at the moment. How ambitious are you at the moment? In what ways are you already ambitious? And what tiny ways could you be a little bit more ambitious? Is there an ambition? Is there a goal that you've been worrying about or avoiding or thinking there's no way I could do that? How could you make it a little bit easier to believe that it might be possible and to start supporting yourself on that process? I really hope you found today useful. Been thinking about being more strategic and more ambitious. Do go back, check out the 3 others where we were thinking about those other 6 qualities. We've got 2 more coming in a few weeks' time. If you want any more support with this, I have my Be Your Own Best Boss online course where I'll take you through all of it. But if you're someone who's like, yeah, I could buy the course, Vic, but I probably won't finish it, then maybe you do better in a community setting, in which case check out my membership program, because not only do they get all the coaching and the support, they also get access to all the online courses. So you would get Be Your Own Best Boss for free as part of that membership. You can find out all about it in the PhDlifecoach.com. You can contact me through the website if you have any questions. You can find me on Twitter at Dr. Vicky Burns, on Instagram at the PhD Life Coach. And if you already get my newsletter, you can always reply to that with any questions. If you're interested in the membership, I can set you up with a free seminar so you could come and see it in action. So let me know if you want to try that. I hope today has been useful and I've got your brain buzzing about what goals you could achieve this year. Thank you all for listening, and I will see you next week. Thank you for listening to the PhD Life Coach podcast. If you like this episode, please tell your friends, your colleagues, and your universities. I'd appreciate it if you took the time to like, leave a review, give me stars, stickers, and all that general approval as well. If you'd like to find out more about working with me, either for yourself or for people at your university, please check out my website at thephdlifecoach.com. You can also sign up to hear more about my free group coaching sessions for PhD students and academics. See you next time.